reason I break these cinematography style videos down into two sections, philosophy and gear, is because cinematography is an art form that is in a constant state of balance between these ideals. Some DOPs place a large importance on the technical side of cinematography. Bradford Young, however, is a cinematographer who is enamored with the philosophical implications of photography. This philosophical approach of his has resulted in a strong, signature style. He is a master of creating raw, subtle, naturalistic images. In this video, I'll be looking at Bradford Young's personal philosophy on creating visuals and analysing how his use of technical gear allows him to execute his vision. Young is an American-born cinematographer. From an early age, he claims to have been more inspired by other art forms such as painting and literature. However, after high school, he went on to study film at Howard University. He began working as a freelance documentary cinematographer before transitioning to shooting independent feature films, many of which found festival success and won him several awards. He's worked with many acclaimed directors such as Dee Reese, Andrew Desunmu, David Lowery, Ava DuVernay, and Denis Villeneuve. Over his career, he's gone from shooting primarily independent festival films to larger and larger blockbusters. Despite his transition to larger budget filmmaking, his cinematic style and philosophy has remained largely unchanged. For me, it's about being imperfect. I'm not attracted to precision-orientated cinematography. I'm more interested in photography that has feeling. Prioritizing raw, naturalistic emotion in an understated way is one of his trademarks. This can be seen in the films and directors that he chooses to collaborate with. He has a preference for shooting more personal stories, which he feels he can relate to, and which his unique approach and philosophy to cinematography is best suited to. He described his initial uncertainty about shooting a Star Wars film for this reason. I got a call from my agent about a Star Wars spin-off. I was flattered, but felt it was quite a reach. There was no bridge between the naturalistic work I do and Star Wars. However, the more he thought about it, the more he found a way to blend his style with that of the film. I've always been interested in the bridge between dark comedy and dark photography. Plus, Solo, a Star Wars story, was a period film, part western, part road movie, with sophisticated humor that teases out character studies of young soul rebels on the run. Overall, I felt that if we could make this movie with a dark and more organic temperament, with what I call spirited blacks, it could be a real move forward in how Star Wars movies feel. So again, it comes back to this notion of feeling. Part of creating this feeling comes from his approach to lighting. I feel my cinematography is about being naturalistic, with a subdued imprint in the way the camera technology and lighting are used. Most of his work embraces natural ambient light, deliberate minimal camera movement, and immersive lens choices. His style never imposes on the story. His photography is a subtle touch, a guiding hand that provides an understated perspective on the story. It's unobtrusive enough that it doesn't draw attention to itself, yet strong enough that it influences how the audience views the on-screen world presented. Let's take a closer look at how Young is able to achieve this simple, naturalistic look. It all stems from his lighting style. As mentioned, he loves natural, ambient light. In order to replicate the look of natural light with artificial sources, the key is softness. One technique he uses to soften light is by bouncing it. He takes the softness a step further by using a technique called book lighting. This is where a light source is first bounced off a textile or white surface, and it's then diffused a second time by letting that bounced light pass through a diffusion frame. Here's an example of this from Ain't Them Bodies Saints. In this film, he lit the entire movie with only tungsten light. He would create a book light using a source such as a 5K tungsten Fresnel. First, he would bounce the 5K off unbleached muslin textile. Then, he would soften it again as the light passed through a full or half-grid cloth diffusion. This creates beautifully soft shadows which imitate the look of sunlight bouncing into a room. The danger of making light too soft, however, is that the softer light becomes, the less contrast it tends to provide. To counter this and create soft light with ample contrast, Young often employs another technique called negative fill. Different colors on the color spectrum affect light in different ways. Basically, when light comes into contact with a white surface, it bounces off. When light comes into contact with a dark surface, it absorbs the light. So placing a black textile, such as a 4x4 black floppy, near an actor's face will absorb light on one side. This therefore increases contrast in a naturalistic way and is called negative fill, as it takes away full light as opposed to adding it. Young uses this technique to subtract ambient light from spaces to achieve his dark, natural look. One way to do this is to rig black cloth to the ceiling of a room. Usually, natural light hits a white ceiling and produces more full light in a room. If the ceiling is blacked out, then there's less ambient bounce, which creates a subtle, darker image. Bradford Young has used an array of lights in his films, such as LED sky panels, tungsten Fresnels, and HMIs. But it's the basic principles of bounce, diffusion, and negative fill that he employs, which are key to his soft, naturalistic look. In terms of technical camera gear, lenses play a vital role. He loves images with a subtly textured look. When talking about this, he used an analogy about an object from his childhood, a quilt. It's really just honoring what quilt makers do, which is to tell a story by using varying texture within a specific framework to communicate an idea. For me, with digital technology, lenses do that the best. The chips don't do it now. Digital film stock is basically all captured the same way, but the lenses are how you give the image its textural quality. To get this texture, his choice of lenses tend towards imperfect, vintage glass. He's used standard, older cinema lenses such as the Zeiss Super Speeds, but has an affection for using unusual, specially tuned glass. He's used the large format ARRI DNA lenses, which are rehoused and tweaked Hasselblad stills lenses. He's used altered Zeiss Ultra Primes and vintage Todd AO anamorphic glass. He even recently started his own company, Tribe 7, which produces custom, detuned lenses called Blackwing 7s. He likes to shoot on wider focal lengths as it allows him to get physically closer to the actors. Shooting at a close proximity with wider lenses creates a greater level of intimacy in his photography. He tends to shoot on ARRI cameras. When shooting film, he's used cameras such as the ARRICAM LT. Digitally, he's used various iterations of the Alexa sensor, the Alexa Mini, Alexa XST, and the Alexa 65. Like the rest of his simplistic approach to creating images, the camera movement in his films is equally simplistic. When I use a dolly or a camera movement, I always want it to be as subtle and as understated as possible. I try to create a sort of delicacy to how the camera moves. Whether using a dolly, a Steadicam, or a handheld camera, the way the camera moves always embodies this minimal approach. Like his choice of lenses, his decisions regarding subtle camera movement also help to create images which are immersive and intimate. This is Bradford Young's style. Whether shooting a low-budget indie picture or a sci-fi blockbuster, his psychological approach of creating imperfect images full of feeling combines perfectly with his technique of creating naturalistic, intimate cinematography. Ironically, in most art forms, one of the most difficult styles to create is a technique rooted in subtlety and simplicity. Large, stylized, obtrusive brush strokes are easy. It takes a deft and practiced hand to sketch lightly, unnoticed, yet meaningfully. Thanks for watching this episode of Cinematography Style. If you enjoyed watching, please give the video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. I'd love to know your thoughts on Bradford's work, as well as any suggestions you might have for future videos. Until then, thanks for watching, and goodbye.